Hello friends, for today's video I wanted to go through a list of some books and manga that I think desperately need adaptations. And the first one that I'm going to kick this off with is one that if you are a manga fan, I feel like there is sort of this question of how is it even possible that this doesn't have an adaptation yet, and that would be Vagabond. I think that a big reason this doesn't have an adaptation is because the art is so incredibly stunning that I don't even know if we were to get an anime of this that it would be comparable, because it's already good at the beginning. However, as you progress through the story, the artwork becomes more and more unbelievable to a point where you almost don't even want to read the text bubbles. You don't even want to progress through the story. You just want to sit and stare, not at a page, but single panels at a time, because it just gets out of this world incredible. And if you don't know the story about Vagabond, you are following Musashi, who was a real person in history, as he is sort of coming to terms with what it means to be the greatest and what he previously considered that to be, and then what he is discovering that actually might be. Despite the fact it's a samurai story and you would expect there to be a lot of fighting, which there is, it's actually incredibly introspective to a point where it begins so painfully frustrating when you are seeing this character over and over and over again seem to fall and misunderstand and take the wrong lessons away from certain things. And then as the story progresses, he's starting to reflect, he's starting to learn, he's starting to really internalize what's happening and what he's doing and the consequences of his actions, and then changing from there. But it takes so long. And it's nice though, because in doing a story like that, you really feel like you are getting your time's worth of his exploration as a character. Because a lot of times change in characters happens maybe a little too rapidly, and it happens as a result in that pacing of wanting to ensure the reader doesn't get bored. And so while I think you run that risk a tiny bit with Vagabond, I think in the end it really feels that much more realistic and impactful. All of that said, while an anime would be fantastic, I also think games like Ghost of Tsushima prove that you can do an incredible samurai story for gaming consoles. Because Ghost of Tsushima is a phenomenal video game. It really explores the morality of our main character. You get to explore side characters, which there are a lot of side characters in this. And Ghost is a video game where the landscape is so lush and so beautiful. Can you imagine Vagabond, if you've played this video game I'm talking about? Can you imagine it having life breathed into it in the same fashion as Ghost of Tsushima? It would be the best. It would be, as long as it doesn't fail triumphantly in the mechanics or something, I feel like it would be game of the year potential. Creating a game that looks like Ghost, has the story that is as compelling as Vagabond's story, and has phenomenal voice acting. Oh, it would be so good. Add music to all of that too. It'd be great. It'd be so phenomenal. So I want there to be a video game adaptation. I'll take an anime, of course, too. But can we get a video game of this? I think it would be so good. Anyway, I'm curious, if you are a fan of Vagabond and you had to choose, if you're somebody who watches anime and plays video games, if you had to choose, would you want it to be an anime or would you want it to be a video game? I think I'm leaning toward video game. Just because the art's already so good that I don't know how it would translate to an anime. But maybe the anime would be great. I don't know. I think I gotta go video game. In a very, very similar vein, we have Sword of Kaigen. And I say similar because I think Vagabond in this, there are some parallels. Not necessarily in the plots, but if we were to get an adaptation, I could also see this making a phenomenal video game. This does, of course, though, have magic, where Vagabond is historical and thus does not. But this one, in a video game, I think the magic would be captured really, really well. I think it would be so unexpected, because really fantastic stories and games, I've not really seen too many that do what Sword of Kaigen does, and I don't want to say what that is, and I don't even want to point out video games that maybe kind of do, because that would also reveal probably what I'm talking about. But I just think it would take the gaming community by storm. I think people would find this to be very unexpected, very unique, the same way that readers have felt that. However, I could also see this being a phenomenal adapted movie, because I think that the magic, you could I'm normally pretty picky about adapting fantasy because the magic usually looks pretty bad. But I think the magic in this could be captured quite well if a lot of care is put into it. I also think given the nature of the setup of the story and the things that we're exploring with the characters, that it really has the potential to make a good movie, as it doesn't go through too much as far as its scope. It's not too epic. It doesn't take too much to understand this world, as it actually is more like our world than you realize at first, except for you're zeroing in on this one area that seems stuck in a different time, and there's been a lot of propaganda fed to the population to make them believe what the government wants them to believe, to make them act in a way that is in service to the country, that is in service to Kaigen, and thus they have roles to fulfill as a result of this propaganda they've been fed. And if you don't know anything about this story, you are following a couple of main perspectives. One of them is a mother, and then the other is her son. And the son is starting to question things, and while the mother is very proud of him, and she wants to reveal the truth of things to him, she also knows just how dangerous it is to do that. And then you kind of look at her past, and you see everything that she has sacrificed and lost, and then how all of that comes together through a very monumental moment in the story, and then what we do from that point on. It's written in a way that's different as far as its pacing, the really big moments. It's a little different than, I would say, structurally, a lot of what I've come across in fantasy. So I think that could take a lot of people by surprise in a movie as well. But I could also see this making a phenomenal mini-series. I think it would be so good as a mini-series because there's enough moments that felt like the ends of episodes in this book that I could just imagine sobbing at the end of certain episodes and then being like, how do we move on from here? And then having to trudge through with the characters' life beyond certain points. I think it'd be so good. But I also could see this done as an animated show as well, and not live action, because if it wasn't clear, I was referring to live action previously. I could see this being animated and it being fantastic. I could see a style similar to Blue Eye Samurai, if you've watched that. If you have no idea what Blue Eye Samurai is, I'll link my review for it. But I could see this being done similar to Blue Eye Samurai and looking fantastic. I could also see it just being anime. It could be anything. I just think this needs to be adapted. It's so good. There's so many things that could be adapted and I think would be phenomenal. Sword of Kaigen, though, is so different in so many ways, and it definitely flips expectations on their head. That's part of the reason why I'd want that to be adapted. Next up, Witch Hat Atelier. So it's pretty clear I love this series, so I don't probably need to hype it up too much. I did a whole video recently about why the series is amazing, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about the plot or anything like that, but there has been an announcement that this is going to get an anime. However, I think that announcement was 2 years ago, and I don't know if we've heard anything since. So, on that note, can we get an adaptation, please? Can we get an anime for this? It would be so good. Similar to Vagabond, I do wonder if the beauty of it would be lost a bit, but I don't think so, because Vagabond, it being an anime, part of why I think it would almost lose some of its beauty is in the shades of gray, I'll say. And I don't mean that metaphorically, I mean literally, it's black and white in the drawings. So I think that there is something to be said of the art style remaining as is, whereas if you were to adapt it, you would probably add color and it would inevitably be a different style. Whereas this, when you look at the covers and you look at some of the artwork that the artist has done that's not necessarily in the panels themselves, like throughout the story, but, you know, like the backs of things or samples and things like that, it's so whimsical and lush and vibrant. So if you could kind of just take this exactly as it is, except for obviously add motion, voice acting, music, and then color, it would be so beautiful. It would be gorgeous, and I so want this to be an anime. It'd be one of the best. It's already one of the best manga series. It would be such a good anime series as well. So if it's true and it's getting an anime, can the announcement of when it's going to come out happen already? Because I need it to. I need it to happen. Next up, I have compared this book so many times in talking about it to Shrek. So I'm just going to say I want this book to be adapted and I want it to have that style of animation. And that would be A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking. So I've mentioned this story a number of times, but the setup is you follow a world where some people have magic. However, the magic is very specific to the individual, and our main character's magic has to do with baking. and dough and pastries and those sorts of things, and trying to ensure, like, don't go bad, don't burn, make sure you're fluffy. Like, she just kind of encourages the dough to be a certain way, and then usually it works because that's what her magic is for. At the beginning of the story, there is a murder that has occurred, and the body is in her family's bakery, and she is a prime suspect, despite the fact that she's a young girl. But her having magic definitely puts people on high alert. So it starts out as a story with this girl trying to clear her name. She's only 14. And then as the story progresses, it turns into something much bigger. And I just think if this was adapted in this similar fashion to Shrek, the humor would translate well to a movie, specifically a movie with that style. And I think that the whimsy of it would also fit really well in that way. If it's not clear, there's so many books and so many stories that I think need adaptations. Not need, but would be great if they could reach audiences through having multiple mediums. However, I'm highlighting books that I think are contrasting each other pretty nicely as far as, okay, this one would make a great video game, this one would make a great anime, this one would make a good movie, but with this specific style of animation. So I'm trying to have a lot of different styles and a lot of different kinds of stories. Next up is one that had an anime, got canceled, and I'm like, can I get an anime again? And that would be Yona of the Dawn. I think that this series gets better as it goes. It's definitely a commitment, because when it starts, it's kind of silly, it's very angsty, it's very episodic in nature, and then as you progress, the stakes get really big, you have really epic battles, and I just think it ends up having a lot more depth the more you progress through it. And by not having the anime continue, you miss out on that. And if you haven't picked up the manga, it's kind of a big commitment to ask somebody, like, can you read at least, like 40 volumes, and also it's not done yet, so that you can get to the good stuff. It's just so much easier for people who are new to a series to jump into an anime than a manga. So I really would love it if this had an adaptation again. If you don't know the story, I definitely think I was kind of like, oh, this is fun, but we'll see. But the setup is that you follow this young girl who is a princess, and then something happens to the people in her family, and she is now on the run, and her throne has been taken. So she is now looking to find these legendary dragon warriors, recruit them, and then get her throne back. But then along the way, there's some very interesting things that happen politically, especially given that the person who has taken her throne is actually doing a pretty good job. So then there's the question of, do I try to get my throne back? I mean, they're kind of ruling pretty well. So I think that that's a very fascinating thing to explore. But it takes so long at the beginning, because I definitely went in and, like I said, I thought it was fun. It was silly, but then things definitely get a lot more serious as you go, while still having the fun, silly moments, great relationship building across the characters. And I think that it having this kind of ensemble cast makes it so that there's always something. There's always something funny to happen, something sad to happen. You're always worried about somebody. You're always waiting, will this person come just in time to save this person? Which I think it utilizes the ensemble cast really well. Now that I'm saying all that, I'm like, RPG? That could be fun. Oh, the Dragon Warriors as playable characters in an RPG would be a lot of fun. Okay, maybe I don't want a new anime for that. Maybe I want a video game. I don't know. It could be whatever. I just want it to make a return. Anyway, last for today, of course, I had to bring up the Cosmere. We need a Cosmere adaptation. It would be so good. And I have always said that I think Mistborn specifically would make a phenomenal video game. Oh, it'd be so good. I've said it so many times. I did a whole video dedicated to how I would personally like to see Mistborn as a video game. So I'll have that linked if you are curious. But just in general, it's such a phenomenal world. It is like the next MCU, in my opinion, except for hopefully it would end at some point and then not just like, never mind. I'm not going to get into why I think the MCU is not as good anymore. But anyway, so I think these stories are phenomenal. I'm obviously a huge Cosmere fan, so I would love to see my favorite characters on screen in some fashion. I do get scared, though. That is one thing I'll say, that if it is live action, I don't have a lot of hope in live action adaptations basically ever. So I don't know that with how epic these worlds are and how intense the magic is, that a live action would look very good. I personally would love to see this animated, and I'm not saying I want the animation style to look like Arcane's, but I just mean Arcane obviously hit a certain audience, and the exploration of mental health was done so well in that show that it's proven you can have this awesome world that's so different from our own. You can have magic, you can have a series of characters, you can have really, really fantastic villains, and you can explore the mental health of the characters. You can do all of those things in an animated series and have enormous success. And if you like those things, I'm like, oh, Stormlight has all of that, as a lot of his works do. And the Cosmere as a whole, it has so many different types of stories within it. Some of them are more political, some of them are more epic, some of them are more romantic. There's just so much to it, and there's so many things you could do. We just need something. I could also see Stormlight making a cool video game world. I don't know that necessarily I would think you should play the main characters as the character. Well, maybe you could. I could also just see it, though, as you are in Roshar and you are a character in that world. I think that could be cool. It could be cool to have that and a show to go alongside it. Speaking of Arcane, I mean, Arcane obviously stemmed from a video game, so you can have both. Am I selfish for wanting both? I kind of want both. But anyway, that's it for some books and manga that I think would make phenomenal video games, movies, TV shows. And I would love to know what are some that are top of your list for manga and books that you would love to see adapted. And if you had to choose the medium, what would it be? I would love to know. Do you agree with the ones I've mentioned? Are you also like, yeah, the ones you mentioned, those ones. Those are the ones I want adapted. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.